we're diving deep into the story of a man named Abram. His journey, it kicks off with this single, totally life-altering command from God, and it sets in motion a story that literally shapes the course of history. So you might be asking, who exactly was this guy, Abram, and why should I care? Well, here's the thing. His story is way more than just some ancient text. He's considered the spiritual father for three of the world's biggest religions. We're talking Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So yeah, for billions of people, his journey is where it all begins. All right, so let's get into it. The whole thing starts with a divine call. And this wasn't some gentle suggestion, okay? This was a radical, life-changing instruction, and it came when Abram was at an age where most folks are thinking about kicking back and retiring, not starting a massive cross-country adventure into the complete unknown. Get this, he was 75 years old. 75. And that's when God tells him, hey, leave everything you know, your country, your family, your father's house, and just go to a land that I will show you. I mean, can you even imagine that? The sheer amount of faith it would take to just uproot your entire life based on a promise. It's just, wow.
But see, it wasn't just a command. It came with this incredible three-part promise. God says first, I'm going to make you a great nation. Second, I'm going to bless you and make your name famous. And third, and this is the big one, through you, all the families on earth are going to be blessed. For Christians, this is like the very first whisper of a promise that points all the way to Jesus.
So what does Abram do? He just obeys. He packs up all his stuff, takes his nephew Lot, and heads out. And as he travels, he keeps building these altars to worship God. It really establishes this pattern right from the get-go that Abram is a man of active, moving faith.
But, just arriving in the so-called promised land, well, that wasn't the happy ending. Not even close. In fact, it was just the start of a whole new set of trials that were going to put Abram's faith under some serious pressure. Yeah, almost right away, disaster hits. A massive famine sweeps through the land. So bad that this promised land can't even support him. He's forced to pack up again and head down to Egypt, which was kind of the breadbasket of the region back then. And this move, it sets the stage for his first big moral test. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of his fear. Abram is genuinely terrified that the Egyptians will see how beautiful his wife Sarai is and just kill him to take her. So he comes up with this, let's call it a plan. He tells her, just say you're my sister. It's a real moment of fear, and it shows you he wasn't some perfect superhero. He was a human being. Well, the whole she's my sister thing doesn't exactly go well. God sends plagues on Pharaoh's household, the truth eventually comes out, and Pharaoh basically kicks Abram out of Egypt. He comes back to Canaan way wealthier than before, but now he and Lot have so much livestock and so many possessions that the land literally can't support both of them living together. New wealth, new problems. So Abram, in this incredible gesture of generosity, he tells Lot, hey, you pick first. You take whatever part of the land you want. Lot looks around and he sees the Jordan Valley, which looks lush and green, kind of like a paradise. He chooses that, setting up his tents near the city of Sodom, a place that was infamous for its wickedness. And believe me, that choice is going to have some major consequences down the line. Okay, so now the story takes a really interesting turn. We get to see a completely different side of Abram. We've seen him as this faithful pilgrim, as a worshiper, and even as the guy who gets scared. But here we see Abram the warrior, a powerful, capable, and decisive leader. So this regional war breaks out between a bunch of local kings, and in the chaos, Lot and his family get captured. So what does Abram do? He doesn't hesitate for a second. He gathers 318 of his own trained men from his own household, chases down the enemy army, and launches a successful rescue mission. He gets Lot back along with all their stuff. This is Abram, the man of action. And it's actually right here in this part of the story that Abram is called a Hebrew for the first time. The term probably came from the local Canaanites, and it meant something like wanderer or the one who crossed over. It's a perfect description for this outsider who had journeyed from way over on the other side of the Euphrates River. So on his way back from this battle, a truly mysterious and fascinating figure just appears out of nowhere, Melchizedek. He is both the king of a city called Salem, which we're pretty sure later becomes Jerusalem, and he's also a priest of God Most High. He brings out bread and wine and gives Abram this incredible blessing. And in response to that blessing, Abram does something that's never been recorded before.
He gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything he'd recovered from the battle. This is huge because it's the very first time we see the practice of tithing in the entire Bible. It establishes this core idea of giving a portion back to God. And for a lot of theologians, this mysterious priest king is also seen as a foreshadowing of Christ, who is also both a priest and a king.
Okay, now we're getting to the absolute peak of this part of Abram's story. This is the moment where God takes his promise and formalizes it, sealing it in this incredibly dramatic and frankly kind of weird ancient ceremony. You see, despite all the victories and all the blessings, Abram's central heartache is still there. He's old, and he has no children. That promise of a great nation must have felt like a cruel joke. So he just lays his doubt out before God. And God's response isn't anger. It's an even bigger, grander, more spectacular reassurance. Remember how earlier God had promised him descendants as numerous as the dust of the earth? Well, now God takes Abram outside at night and just says, look up, look at the stars, try and count them. He says, that's how many descendants you're going to have. The promise gets elevated from this huge, earthly number to an infinite, cosmic one. And this next line, this is one of the most important lines in the whole story. It says that in that moment, faced with a totally impossible promise, Abram simply believed. He trusted God, and the text says that God credited it to him as righteousness. This is the bedrock for what's known as justification by faith, the idea that a right standing with God comes from trusting him, not just from trying to do enough good things. So, to seal this incredible promise, God tells Abram to perform this ancient covenant ritual. And it's pretty graphic. You take these animals, you cut them in half, and you lay the pieces opposite each other, creating a path. Then, the two people making the deal would walk between the pieces, which was basically their way of saying, if I ever break this promise, may I become like these animals. It was the most serious vow you could possibly make. But then, as Abram falls into this deep, supernatural sleep, God gives him a glimpse of the future, a detailed prophecy. He tells him, your descendants will be foreigners in a land that isn't theirs, and they'll be enslaved there for 400 years. But after that, I'll bring them back to this very land. I mean, this is a plan that spans generations. Then, as total darkness falls, something amazing happens. Abram doesn't walk between the animal pieces. Instead, a smoking firepot and a blazing torch, which are symbols of God's own divine presence, they are what pass between the pieces. And this is the most incredible part of the whole story. God alone walked the path. Abram was just a spectator. This means it wasn't a contract between two equal parties. It was a one-sided, unconditional guarantee. God was symbolically placing the entire burden of the promise and the curse for breaking it on its own shoulders. He was saying, I will make this happen, no matter what. And that leaves us with this really profound question. This chapter of Abram's life closes not with a baby in his arms, but with a promise of a future that's 400 years away. It really makes you stop and think, what does it truly mean to have faith in a promise that you know you will never, ever live to see fulfilled?